Good morning, everyone. How are you today? First and foremost, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers across the world who have been, who are, and who will be mothers of us all. Today is a day of remembering those who gave birth to us, those who were there for us constantly, who no matter what, no matter how terrible of a child we might have been, were there by our side to forgive us, to teach us, to nurture us, and make sure that we grow to really fulfill our missions as human beings. But as we look and we express gratitude to our mothers, today during the service, I surrendered my most sincere gratitude to God, the true parent of our life, who gave birth to us in heaven, who is alive with us at this very moment. And were it not for God and God's breath of life, none of us would be here today. I believe that as we experience the world here in this physical world, God is allowing us to have a small taste of what it means to be a parent, what it means to be a child, and the great joy that God must feel after giving birth to all of us in his heaven and being there constantly with us through the good times and the bad, nurturing us and educating us to become his true children. But I also believe that we are at a very important moment in time where God, as our true parent, wants to guide us to the next phase of our lives. If you'd be a child learning to walk, where God is testing our faith. Yes, sounds strange. But I believe that God is asking each one of us at this very moment, do we really and truly believe that God is alive? That God exists within each one of us? That God is nurturing us to be born anew as his children? In the teaching today, which was written in 1950, Meishu Sama talked about a world that was changing, a world where God was ever so closer and the world of God was being created. And in the teaching, Meishu Sama says, I am going to appear on the main stage. Accordingly, it is inevitable that the way we advance our divine work, including our organizational structure, the forms of our activities, and everything else, will change. Everything else that we have been doing up to now will change. In fact, everything will be born anew. Meishu Sama wrote this teaching in 1950 when he did the inaugural statement for World Church of Messiah, when our church was born with the name World Church of Messiah, to become a church in a worldwide scale. And Meishu Sama was talking about him coming to the forefront. This was in 1950. Meishu Sama was preparing us because in 1954, he started to put all these changes into practice. It is amazing. Everything that Meishu Sama did that brought us up to that point in 1950, actually in 1954, he changed everything. He turned the world upside down. As he said in the teachings, old cultures will be destroyed. New cultures will be created. Those that are useful will remain. He also said in the teaching in 1950, the forms of the divine scroll and the ohikari, the sacred focal point, can be left as they are just for a while, until a certain moment. I have so many other announcements to make, but for today, I will stop them right here. And then in 1954, Meishu Sama started making these announcements. We are now in the age of Soni. He said many times to many of his followers, from here on, we enter the world of Soni. It is different than before. From here on, Soni is particularly important. These are Meishu Sama's words in 1954, where he started implementing all the changes that he talked about in 1950. I believe that Meishu Sama was not just saying these changes because of his brain hemorrhaging, where he could not lift his hand to channel Jorei physically. If that were true, he would have not said, this is different than before. From here on, Soni is particularly important. Then Meishu Sama continued in that time, and he said, from now on, I will do everything with words and Soni. Everything. Not just a few things, everything with words and Soni. Then he continued even further. Repent and express this to God through your Soni. Then you will be forgiven. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, when we say Soni, we mean the mind, which is our thoughts and our feelings. There's a word for that in Japanese. It's called Soni. And Meishu Sama says that our mind, the power of our mind, can reach infinity in an instant. Can reach infinity. That's impossible to even fathom. We are being given the opportunity to learn these words of Meishu Sama, his living teachings, through the journal entries of Reverend Motokichi Inoue, which have been shared by Masaki Sama in his article, True Jorei, the True Jorei of Meishu Sama. This is something that I believe was very radical in Meishu Sama's time. Imagine the dilemma it must have created when, during all of Meishu Sama's time, he was talking about Jorei and miracles of Jorei and saving people through Jorei, the Jorei that we know, the physical Jorei. And then all of a sudden, Meishu Sama starts talking about something beyond that, about Soni, about the power of our mind, and how God was working through the power of our mind and our words from now on. I think that God started challenging our faith, not only today, but at that time. The teaching today also talks about finishing evil off, obliterating evil. Now, when we hear these words, obliterating evil, it is easy for us to point the finger out into the world. Evil people, people creating wars, conflict. Oh, Meishu Sama must be talking about obliterating the evil that's out there. The good will remain. But what exactly does Meishu Sama mean by obliterating evil? Is it truly those who are out there? There is a poem of Meishu Sama that he says that evil is fostered in the minds of insincere people. And then, as we study this week, in another poem, Meishu Sama said that true sincerity comes from God. In the hearts of true, sincere people are people who truly know God. So, in other words, evil, the origin of evil, is not out there. That is a reflection of what's in our hearts, of us not accepting the true God. Because sincerity, goodness, can only come from God. Not from me, not from my actions, not from my thoughts, but from God. So first and foremost, I need to acknowledge that living God, that true God. It is impossible for me to say that I believe in God if I cannot accept that the true, supreme God, creator of all things, is alive within my consciousness, in the center of my soul. For me to be able to accept that that true, living God is alive in everybody else and in all the world, I need to accept that that true, living God is alive in the center of my consciousness. Because we human beings have failed to do so, we have nurtured and fostered evil in an insincere heart, a heart that does not truly accept a living God. And you may think, oh, minister, that's not true. I serve, I pray, I channel Joreh. But in that act itself, I can show you how far away we have strayed from that true and living God. When we raise our physical hand to channel Joreh, why is that concept so much easier to grasp than Joreh through our soning, through our thought, through the power of the mind? Let's think about that. If the supreme God, living God that we say that we accept and we acknowledge, really exists and is really alive, then God's light is shining in the center of our souls every day, all the time, constantly. I'm receiving light from God every day, all the time. God is illuminating each one of us. But because I have such a hard time in accepting that, I want to raise my hand to prove to myself that I am doing something, that I am serving God, and that God's light at that moment is channeling through me. Our thought has become so physical and materialistic, which is the essence or the origin of evil is materialism. We have become so locked and obsessed with the physical phenomenon that for us, we prefer to acknowledge God and God's work through a physical act than to simply by accepting that God is alive. We may give ourselves many excuses, and I pardon my language when I say excuses. But when I raise my hand, I can feel my hand warm up. I can feel it tingling, or it's easier for me to concentrate. But in that, in reality, we are justifying not accepting God being alive in the center of our consciousness. It's just a justification. It's like a kid. When they turn to their parent, and their parent says, don't do this. There's a better way to do it. And they give you 1,000 reasons why their way is better, why it works better for them. I know. I was a kid myself. I do it till today. Right? How many mothers must have had that experience? They come and tell their child, there's a better way to do that. Or, don't do your homework in front of the television. Shut off the TV. It'll be better for you to concentrate if you sit at your table and do your homework. Oh, no, it's better for me to focus. I like the background noise. In reality, you're just over there saying, no, I just want to keep the TV on and do what I'm doing. Leave me alone. I know I've used that excuse many times. I love doing things while watching TV. But going back to the point, what about our faith? What are we constantly trying to justify to God that we are in charge, that we know more, or that we don't accept that God is truly alive. If we truly accept that God is alive, there is no problem in what Meishu Sama said about from now on, the world, I will do everything through soning in words. There's no problem with that. Why? Because God is alive through Meishu Sama. And through soning, through words, everything happens. So, when Meishu Sama talks about obliterating evil, it's not about obliterating the evil outside. That's just a mere reflection of ourselves. Yes, the evil that's in our heart. And only through the power of the word Messiah, the vibration of the spiritual power of the word Messiah, can that evil be eliminated. Why is that? Because when we recognize that the Supreme God is alive in the center of our consciousness, and we return ourselves to the center of our souls, to heaven, through the word Messiah, when we do that, our ego, what we think is our true self, which is just an illusion, becomes powerless before God. God embraces all of that in his light and uses all of that to serve his purpose. It is not that we are more powerful than God. It is the illusion that we think we are. We live in a world that is so self-centered in feeding our ego that we refuse to recognize that we can only live because God is alive. And when we, as Meishu Sama says in many of his poems, get down on our knees before God and surrender ourselves, recognizing that we are powerless before God, that he's truly alive, only then do we really start to live. When we surrender all of ourselves back to God. So at this moment, God is challenging our faith. We tried to hide it for years. Right after Meishu Sama passed away, we changed the name of the church. We continued talking about Jorei in a physical sense. We kept telling everybody that we were in this huge transition that one day would come, just to avoid the truth that Meishu Sama turned everything inside out in 1954, when he declared that we were now in the age of Sonia. And then we can blame the church. Yes, there's a huge responsibility within the church and the ministers for that, for not sharing that. But is that just another excuse for us not to do what we need to do? And why do I say that? Because all we are experiencing is a physical reflection of what happened spiritually. That means each and every single one of us had the responsibility, had a part in what happened, in how we dealt and deal with God on a daily basis. From the beginning of time, from the beginning of all things in the world of origin, we all turned our backs to God and said, we know more. We all separated ourselves. God is alive through us, but we created this wall where we said, God is in heaven somewhere, and I'm going to live here on earth. And we stopped recognizing that we only breathe because God's breath of life is breathing through us. We only live because God lives through us. We only are because God is. And we're having an opportunity to experience what the Creator created. to serve him, not us. So we all did that. And God, using all of creation, all things, including the church and everything else, is showing us at this very moment what he forgave. Everything he forgave because he is a true parent. No matter how deviated we got, God forgave. And he's shining that light through the center of our souls, through our hearts, to show us everything he forgave. The question is, are we going to pass God's test of faith? Do you and I want to pass that test of faith? Do we want to really surrender our life back to God and align ourselves with God's will? That's what Meishu Sama came to teach us. That's what Kyosho Sama has been reminding us, that we deviated from Meishu Sama's teachings, from the teachings that God showed Meishu Sama to get us back on the right path. We are so far centered from the true self, from God. And here we are justifying ourselves on a daily basis. And we continue judging God. Yes, we judge God. Every time I raise my hand, I can say, well, Jure worked. How do we know? We are judging a physical act. But that's just a physical act. Maybe someone says a form is nothing without its essence. We're not the ones who channel light. God is channeling that light nonstop within each one of us. Do we recognize that living God? Do we recognize we are receiving God's light and surrender that back to God in gratitude? God, in the name of Messiah, I surrender all these feelings, all these thoughts. I recognize today how flawed I am. I recognize that there's a huge part of me that doesn't want to accept a living God. And that there's a huge part of me that does. And I don't know what to do with that. I think that any mother would be very pleased with their child if the child in the middle of a difficulty can come to the mother and say, I don't know what to do. I thought I did, but I need your help. Please show me the way. I think the biggest frustration for a mother is recognizing that she might know the way for their child to live a better life, to be happy, but the child refuses to ask for help. What about God, who's with us 24/7, who hears every thought and every feeling? And he's saying, my child, you don't need to carry that burden. Just surrender it back to me. It's not for you to carry. It's not for you to fix. It's not for you to suffer over. It's for you to learn that I can help. It's for you to learn that I'm in control. It's for you to learn that I can give you a new life with true prosperity, true harmony, based on what God sees for us. So, as these teachings of Meishu Sama, these living teachings of Meishu Sama are being revealed to us, and we recognize that in reality, nobody's making anything up. God is just giving us a wake-up call. I'd like for each one of us during this Mother's Day to reflect on our true faith. Do we truly believe that God is alive? Do we truly believe that we're receiving God's light nonstop? All of nature, all of creation, life moves, evolves, and grows. Would God be so small that God's divine work only works if I raise my hand? However, God is infinite, all-powerful, all-present. And we're having the opportunity to live as one with God. where we can communicate with God at every instant, every second. Through our mind, we can reach God, who is alive in the center of our consciousness. And all that burden, just surrender it back to God. How much fuller and wonderful life can be if we just choose to accept God being alive and accept that we're here to serve God. So it's time to get rid of that old culture that we've had, that old way of seeing the world where we are at the center, and start learning to live in a world where God is truly the center of everything. It's like a fruit. And people may say, well, everything we did up to now went to waste. Everything is done. How can I throw my back to everything that I've done up to now? And I say it's the contrary. I like peaches. And then a peach is very delicious, right? That's the outer part of the peach. But at the center of the peach, you have a seed, just waiting to germinate. Imagine if you take that peach and you put it on a shelf just to appreciate that outer peach. Two things are going to happen. One, the peach is going to go bad. It's going to mold and decay. And the second, what that fruit was actually protecting, that seed, will never grow. It will never blossom. Within each one of us right now, there is a seed. There is a soul with the name Messiah that's being nurtured by God to blossom, to bring millions of fruits to the world. That's how nature evolves. Are we going to be stuck on the outside, which is everything we've done up to now? Or are we going to learn to plant that seed, to nurture it, and let God nurture it so a new tree is born? New life can be given. Evolution may continue. That's a choice from each one of us. You can be attached to the outer, what apparently is the best part of that fruit. But that's very temporal. But the seed is there just waiting to germinate. So like all of us who are here and have our parents to thank for, who nurtured us, it is time for us to recognize God and let God nurture our soul so that we may be born anew as children of God, as Messiah. It is an individual choice. Nobody can do it for you. But those feelings that we have, positive and negative, are what God needs right now. What God wants us to return to Him. That true sincerity of heart, to open our hearts to God and let God work, is what Mary Summer came to teach us. We don't need to blame ourselves for not accepting or understanding. We just need to surrender it to God and let Him work His miracle. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful Mother's Day weekend. And I look forward to studying with you all during the week. We also have another service coming up, so stay tuned. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.